I'm Susan Richardson Williams, and I chair the Government Relations Committee. Several members are in here today. We appreciate all of you being here this morning. This is an incredibly important topic to our state and certainly to Knox County. Education has been one of the premier issues that we have talked about. Let me get this had on our agenda for the chamber for several years, and we have some school board members in here, and Dr. McIntyre's here, Russ Oakes is here. There are quite a few people that are daily involved in educating our kids in Knox County. Before we get started on education, you have this in your seat. I hope you will take a moment to look at this, and this is actually a call to action. For our chamber members, there is a very important meeting on April the 9th at 5:30. Where is Josh? Is it 5:30? Yes. 5:30. And City County Building to talk about sign ordinances. For 3 years, we've been talking about sign ordinances. Yes. I think everybody's been hearing it for a long time, and there is finally going to be a meeting to discuss the proposal that came from the task force. We're encouraging all of our members to go to this and to provide input. And by the way, the chamber is supporting the task force recommendations. But when you see your city council, George Wallace, raise your hand.
Please aim carefully. I'm just sitting next to you.
So you might take a moment to talk to George when you leave here. And Dwayne's back here too. Thank you all for coming. 3.5 years. Yes. Please look at this. If you have questions, ask us about it. But it really is important as businesses to come to the meeting on April the 9th and let them hear from you. So we appreciate that. Now, we're going to get started. Our topic today is education. We're going to try to be out of here by 8:30 because we all have busy Fridays. As I said, this is a very important topic to us. It's incredibly important to our state. There's been a lot of discussion about Common Core, what we now refer to as Tennessee Higher Standards. There have been several bills in the legislature addressing this, and I think there's basically come down to one now, a bill that Senator Bell and Representative Spivey have. Before we get with those three, get their interest and where they are on it, we have a guest this morning, Jared Bigley, who works for SCORE. I think all of you are familiar with SCORE. Jared's been very engaged in this particular topic because it's important to SCORE. I'll just ask him to give us a quick brief on what this bill does, and again, is it the compromise bill?
Great, thank you. There's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work, I guess, to get to the iteration that we're at now with the current bill, House Bill 1035. And it's been stressful on policymakers, I know, to try to pull this off. And I just want to brag on your delegation for a minute. These men, in varying ways, have impressed me this session. This is my second session. I've been dealing with education policy, and I've met with every policymaker in Nashville at one point or the other, and these three multiple times in one-on-one meetings, and they've been serving Knox County very well. I know Representative Dunn has exhibited some very courageous stances in subcommittees and committees, and stepped out to do what's right for children and students in the state of Tennessee. And Chairman Kane, Representative Kane, is chairing probably the most contentious subcommittee in the legislature right now, the Instruction and Programs Education Subcommittee that has been hearing some very emotional bills this session, and next week will probably be even more emotional, and he has handled that with a lot of grace and patience and good leadership. And this gentleman has impressed me by doing something I rarely see with policymakers. He reads every bill that he's going to be voting on or hearing. When I go into his office, he's got this huge 3-ring binder of bills, and that's very rare. Usually when I go into a policymaker to talk about a bill, I'm explaining it to them. They don't talk back to me about the bill. So he's impressed me as a freshman policymaker, how engaged he's been. But very briefly about the House Bill 1035, this bill basically codifies the governor's review process, where we're taking public comments on an online portal, and those comments will be put into a report by the SREB and given to an English and math work teams made up of K-12 educators and higher ed educators, where they will look at the feedback and see what improvements, enhancements, gaps we can fill in with our current standards to make them better. And people often, when I say this, are surprised to hear me say that this time next year, if we don't have different standards than the Common Core, I'm going to be disappointed. As an educator, as a parent, we want standards that are improved and enhanced from what we have now. We want to continually improve the expectations and the rigor in our classrooms. So the hope is they'll take that information, find ways to make our standards better. They will make recommendations to a standards recommendation committee that will be appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker. That committee will look at those recommendations that were made by the educators and then pass on what they feel is appropriate to the state board. And at that time, the state board will adopt any revisions to the standards, and we will have our own unique Tennessee set of academic standards. And this process is set to complete by December of this year. The change from previous iterations of this bill or versions of this bill is that this process will be conducted the next time we are reviewing social studies standards 5 years from now, and our science standards, which are currently under review now, will probably go through this process before waiting 6 years with the next review. So it won't just apply to math and English, it'll be social studies and science as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, let's introduce yourselves and tell us your district and in this case, the committee you sit on for education.
Eddie Smith, District 13. It starts over at East Helm Mall, so it goes through East Knoxville, North Knoxville, the Inskip, Sequoia Hills, and then wraps around and gets Mount Olive and South Doral High School. And I serve on the Education, Administration, and Planning Subcommittee and full committee.
I'm Roger Kane. I represent District 89, which is basically Karnes, Hardin Valley, a little bit of Cedar Bluff and Farragut, and then I kind of arch over and take in some of Lonsdale and some of Norwood. I'm the chairman of the Education, Instruction, and Planning Committee, and we were the ones hearing, we call it the Common Core Committee. That's pretty much what, we hear. And we just, have been working hard. We're on hopefully the downhill slide this week. We've got 2 committee meetings set up to try to get through the last of the bills that we have to hear, so they can all get on to the full committees and then onto the floor, because we're still planning on ending session somewhere in late April.
Thank you. I'm State Representative Bill Dunn. I live in Fountain City. I represent that area, Halls, and then you go down Emory Road through Brickey out to Powell and go north up into the high school area. I've been doing this for quite a while. I slave under Representative Chairman Kane and his subcommittee, and then, of course, I'm on the full Education Instruction Committee. And can I ask a question while I've got the mic?
Yes.
We talk about standards a lot, and I would guess from the conversation I've had with people, a lot of people don't even know what a standard is. And so could I ask our school board members or Dr. McIntyre just to give some examples? Here's like a third grade standard, so people kind of get an idea of what we're actually talking about when we say that.
Sure. So standards are what we expect our kids to know and be able to do in a particular subject area or grade level. So it might be understanding how to add or multiply fractions, for example, or mathematics at a grade level. So it can be very what we want our kids to know and be able to do. And I invite you to take a look at the standards. A lot of people who are actually haven't looked at the standards and don't know what they are. They're pretty innocuous. The state senate had a hearing last fall, and the first thing they did was they actually read the standards into the record, and it was painful, and it took about 4 hours. At the end of the day, people sort of said, "Well, this is about understanding parts of speech and multiplying fractions. This has been done all the other stuff that we've been hearing about." So I'd encourage you to take a look at the standards. You get them from the website at Tennessee Department of Education, which is TennesseeEducation.gov.
Hey, let me say something about it. It's important to understand what they're not. Standards is not the curriculum that a district develops. And it's certainly not textbook. It's simply what you got to know in order to get the credential for that course and move on to the next. That's all it is. And we've got it on their website, and I will promise you, if you read it, as most of you have, you're going to go, well, man, I thought that was, what's the deal there? I thought that was already there. Trouble is, about 10 years ago, one part. What these guys have done is got us back, probably where most of us were when we were young. Not that I mastered it, but
You knew what you had to do around.
I want to get y'all's responses and where this bill is in the House. Happy to have you here if you want to make any comments anytime. Please let us know. Bill.
Would you talk a little bit about
where this particular bill is, the standards that Jared just described? Roger, is it in your sub? Okay.
House Bill 1035 it started out as House Bill 3 and then went through another metamorphosis and trying to just get the right blend. When we talk about standards, there are lots of really great standards we already have. And so we don't want to throw them all out and start again. So what this bill basically is doing is the governor has had on his website for I guess about 6 months the standards. Teachers are able to, administrators, even the public can go in and review these standards. And you can't just say, I hate it. Or you have to tell why and how you think it can change, which is actually kind of interesting to have a website that you just don't go in and you just pound on it. But you have to actually put input. From what I understand, we've got over 100,000 comments on the standards that we have now. And so House Bill 1035 is incorporating that, and then a review process that'll be Tennessee specific. We're going to get away from the federal program. Education has always been a state issue and should always stay a state issue. But we're going to have Tennessee specific standards where we can get Tennessee teachers involved, and because they're the ones that have to do the work. So rather than having a bureaucrat somewhere in Washington or an educrat somewhere else, these are going to actually be, teachers and people here in the state review these things, take in the governor's initiative that he's got out there, and take the standards and just tweak them to where, like I said, we're not going to throw them all out. Now, we did have that bill up this week in committee. That was painful. We had the repeal Common Core bill, which meant we would start with nothing. We'd actually go back to 2009 standards with the Tennessee Diploma Project. We had a long and contentious conversation about it. And just so you know, the committee voted 0 to 8. Which we voted on over 100 bills, I think, so far this year. It's normally a 6-2 or a 5-3 or a 4-4. We've never had anything that was a 0-8. This is the first time. So the entire committee felt that the process that we're going right now to look at our standards and reevaluate them on House Bill 1035 was much better than repealing Common Core, as several other states have done. And so with that being said, this 1035 should be in full committee this week? Yeah, it'll be in full committee this week, then it'll be on the floor of the House, and I think you'll be impressed. We really did try to, make sure we're not just rubber stamping stuff, that we're actually setting up a committee below the State Board of Education that's actually going to look at this stuff and vet it and make sure that we can get it out, and but still have teachers having input in it, because that's vitally the most important part about it.
Thank you. I think unless you have any questions or comments on Common Core, we have quite a few topics to get to this morning on education. So let's try and rush through some of these issues and bills, and then we'll take some comments or questions if you have them. Roger, while you have the mic, you have a bill that I was unaware of until yesterday called the Tom Cronin Act. All of you probably remember Tom Cronin, husband of Joan Cronin, who passed away a few years ago. Tom was a huge physical fitness guru and was always championing more PE in the schools. So, Roger, it's your bill. Would you explain what this does?
Well, I was really kind of surprised. Everything's being about testing and getting more information into children's heads so they can pass tests and do better. But what we've done is we've relegated some of the other things that you guys probably grew up with to a very small portion of the school day. PE is down to 45 minutes a week. A week. Now, somehow we're supposed to take children and teach them life skills like going to the gym, but with those kind of standards, they would go to the gym 3 times a week for 15 minutes. I mean, that's basically changing your clothes and getting back out of your clothes. I mean, and what this bill does, basically, it doubles it. It makes it 90 minutes a week of physical education with an instructor. It's made it through subcommittee at this point. It'll go to the full committee next week and kind of be heard again. But, you've got to have a well-rounded whole child out there. And when you're just literally trying to cram more information into a head that's just overloaded, physical education will get them outside. They can help put all the material that they've absorbed in the school day into units in their brain while their bodies are working. It's a little different than putting them in maybe an art class or a music class. That's brain work with just a different part of the brain. This is actually going to incorporate their physical, body into it. And hopefully, we lead the nation in childhood diabetes. We lead the nation in obesity, and we're 48th in overall health. It's kind of hard to beat 48th, but hopefully with a little bit more movement. And I understand from the school board point of view, it's going to be difficult. We have to find the time, but we had some testimony this week that there is time in the school day to do this for most students.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
See, Dr. McIntyre here probably would agree with me on this one issue. Are y'all going to put money in the budget to pay the extra instructors or pay the hard work?
No. In fact, the governor has it as part of one of his healthy initiatives. It had a $2.8 million fiscal note, which I'm really kind of surprised because every elementary school should have a PE teacher already on staff. The problem is they're not being used to teach PE. with such a low requirement, they're being used as reading coaches and math coaches. So, of course, I got a little hateful at one point and said, well, I can save you a couple $1 million real quick. Starting today, we will never build an elementary school with a gym anymore because there's no need to have one. I mean, with 45 minutes a week, why are we spending $1 million to put a gym onto an elementary school when no one's ever going to use it? But the governor has seen, at least at this point, that he wants to put it possibly in his budget to make sure that we fund this. Only, I believe, 9 elementary schools had no physical education staff at all. Every other elementary school in the state has them. They're just being used for different things other than teaching PE.
But for the record, I'm going to help you get started. More electrolytes.
0 calories, right?
And
I assume you think it has a pretty good chance of passing. It's out of the sub, right?
The full committee will hear it this week. We'll see. Yeah.
All right, interesting. Representative Dunn, you have a bill along with Senator Briggs that removes the requirement, and I didn't know this was a requirement, but it removes the requirement that local boards of education must include student scores in the TCAP subject areas as part of the student's grade in that subject area. And apparently TCAP scores should fit between 15 and 25% final score in that particular subject. The problem is we're not getting TCAP scores back in time in some places. So your bill would address that, I guess, give some local options. So if you want to talk about that.
It would, and the original law came about probably about 6 years ago, and teachers were telling us a lot of these students don't take the end of the year test seriously, and they should have some skin in the game. So the teachers asked us to make it mandatory that end of the course test, part of the grade would go into their report card. And so we went ahead and passed it. But what we found last year was that when the end of the year tests came back late, it really messed up the locals because instead of sending the report cards home, they had to mail them, which cost more money, which took it away. So our bill with Senator Briggs would just make it the LEAs can decide whether they want this policy or not. I would presume most of them would keep it there, that it would count on the report card, but it give them that flexibility that if the scores aren't coming back on time, then they can make a change unilaterally and take care of it at the local level. And so we anticipate it passing.
All right. While you have the mic, talk a little bit about that bill is moving. It's moved in the Senate. It's actually going to be heard on the Senate floor this coming week. It's in Government Office this week in the House, but it did pass out of education. Your bill, there were 2 or 3 bills, and as all of you know, this discussion's been going on for several years. There's several bills. It looks like now our bill is the one that actually got legs this year. Would you talk about what it does, explain, because there are a lot of educators in here and board members and superintendents and so forth. Would you explain what it does and tell me why you're supporting it? And I think all the rest of you are, but I'll let you address that.
Right. I like to refer to it as the Haslam-Dunn garden hire bill. And there's a reason to say that because Governor Haslam, he recognizes that we have some struggling schools. We like to, the word that's thrown out a lot is failing schools. And so he asked different stakeholders to come together several years ago and sit down and look at the situation. The governor and the legislature were committed to turning these schools around, but until that happens, you've got to give these children a chance. And so the governor came up with this proposal that if you're in the bottom 5%, if you're a failing school, and you're on free and reduced price lunch, then you would get a voucher. I like to call it the Hope Scholarship for K through 12. We all know how the Hope Scholarship works. A parent and the students get a certain amount of money, and then they pick what's the best place for them to go, whether a public school like UT Knoxville or a private school like Maryville College. It seems to work great great, and everybody seems to like our higher education system and the results it's getting. But I'd like to point out something else about the vouchers, because I've really studied this long and hard. And when we talk about a failing school, let me first tell you what we're talking about. In the bill, it talks about the bottom 5%, but I did some research on what these schools were turning out or not turning out. And we're talking about schools where over 90% of the children are not proficient. We're talking about high schools where the average ACT score is 13.7. And by law, truancy laws, we're saying you have to send your child there, and we will give you no options. And so to me, if you can help some child get something better, you can't save everybody, but if you can help them, it makes a difference. And so I was thinking, okay, we're talking about failing schools, and I think sometimes teachers and principals get insulted. They're saying that we're saying they're failing. And I think everybody in discussion would say that a lot of times you have failing schools because you have a failing community. It's the community around the school and what's happening there that's coming into the school that's leading to these dismal results. And so I kept thinking about this, and it dawned on me, one reason we have failing communities is, say you have a young couple moves in and they're kind of urban pioneers. Here we're in Knoxville, let's say the 4th and Gill neighborhood, it's always trying to be revitalized. I know people personally have gone in there, fixed up houses. Well, something happens when your children start reaching 3 and 4 years of age. You start saying, where's my child going to go? And say you're at one of these schools, and the ones where it was 90% and 13, it was Nashville and Memphis. So all of a sudden you say, gee, I can't send my child to a school that the average ACT scores a 13.7. So we already have school choice, and it's called moving. And so you may have these young urban pioneers who've started a neighborhood watch program, who's fixed up their house, who's trying to talk other people, and when they start having kids, they leave. And so the community just gets worse and worse. So I think with this, if you allow them to take care of their desire for their child to have a different opportunity, they can stay in the community, they can continue to fix up their house, do neighborhood watch, do different things there, and who knows, when their kids are gone, they may go into the local school and read to children. So I think we're hurting our communities, which then hurt our schools. So I think it's something else we need to see in this. It has passed out of the education subcommittee. It's out of the full committee. It's going to be in government ops this year, and this week, and then it has to go through finance, and it's actually picking up sponsors as it goes along. So does that do a good explanation?
Either you guys want to weigh in?
That's the other subcommittee. So I'm going to let Eddie talk about it because he was in that one.
Good pass.
And I think what's important, if you go back and watch the testimony, because we heard this in the subcommittee, and I think we spent better part of an hour and a half on it, and then we spent another 2 different committees in the full just discussing this bill. And I think if you go back and watch, and Representative John DeBerry, Democrat from Memphis, made the observation, through all the testimony, what everybody was arguing is protecting the system and protecting the teachers and protecting their jobs. Nobody ever said anything about the students. And when you think about that, it's about the students. Everything we're doing is thinking about the students. But I also want to make this point, because as I talked about it, I wanted to know how would this impact Knox County. And I'm going to talk about this and kind of tie in the ASD as well a little bit. When I asked about ASD, which is the Achievement School District, because we do have 4 schools in Knox County that are on the priority list. So when you get there, typically in Memphis and Nashville, ASD, they start looking at taking over schools. So I asked the question, is ASD planning to come to Knox County? The answer was no, not at this time, because Knox County has so many intervention programs and policies already in place, which most school systems do not have. We want to let them do what they're doing well, because they're turning schools around. We're doing things different from the rest of the state. And as I've gotten in Nashville, the one thing I've kind of found out is, we seem to accentuate a lot of negative sometimes, and I think that gets drowned out with some of the positive going on. The rest of the state kind of looks at what's going well in Knox County and how they can trickle that down. So, you know, when I met with some people from Shelby County, I heard from I got emails both for and against the voucher plan. A lot of parents in the middle and west part of the state were asking for it. Now, it's up to the state board to decide how the vouchers are going to be split, which districts, you know, are going to get them, and I think they're going to focus more in the west part of the state. It's the four main, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis, that really have any of the bottom 5% of the schools. So it doesn't really affect a lot of our rural areas right now. It's mostly our urban areas. So that's kind of a lot of the discussion that happened in those committees around both ASD and vouchers, because they tie together. Because when you look at the bottom 5% of failing schools, that's usually when ASD comes in, and it's also another option for parents to have to say, I want my child to have the best education possible so they have the best chance to succeed. And that's what the vouchers does for those parents. The other thing, and I told Representative Dunn this, and I told our school board last night, everything we do in Nashville, I think we have to constantly evaluate what we're doing. Is it effective or is it not effective? In 3 years, we need to look at the voucher program. Is it obtaining the goals that we intended for it to do? If yes, let's keep going. If not, let's hit pause and see if we need to start walking backwards. But I say the same for everything in our education. We need to find out what are those things that are working well. Let's put more resources into those. The things that aren't working well, let's start walking those back. And I think that's where we're at now. I can't remember who it was. We were talking. It was Billy Spivey, who is running House Bill 1035. He said, you know, we were in such bad shape a few years ago that we ran into the woods, bayonets, and set the whole woods on fire with all these reforms and all the changes. But yet we don't know which one of those things are working. So instead of just yanking them out, we want to really find out what's going on with them. Like I said, to find out what's working well, let's put more resource, more time there, and the things that aren't, let's start walking those back. But let's do it very cautiously so we don't lose ground. We're moving forward and keep climbing the mountain. I think we've taken a few steps up the mountain, but we've still got a mountain to climb. We're still in the bottom half of the states in education of our students that are proficient. So we've got a long ways to go, but we're making progress in that direction.
Okay. I know there are probably a lot of comments on this. A couple more topics, and then we'll try to get some questions. There's another bill that one of our local senators has, Nicely and Representative Womack, that allows parents of students enrolled in an LEA to have a right to excuse their child from taking any state-mandated test and other accommodations from LEAs. Is that a responsible bill? Is that something that has legs? Is that in your committee, Eddie?
It's in our committee. We had 48 bills. That was number 47 in our book this week. We got through it. We spent 2.5 hours on 4 bills. So just so you know, I mean, we're trying to vet to make sure we don't pass a piece of legislation that ends up hurting education in the state. But we did jump around. We did kind of touch on that one. As far as I'm concerned, no. It doesn't. It won't get my support as it stands right now. I believe parents should have some rights, but that goes a little too far, which is just because a parent, if you read kind of on down, and it's about 4 pages long, kind of at essence what it says is, if I want my daughter to graduate, but I don't want her to take the class, she still gets credit for the class and can graduate, even though she's not ready, she didn't pass that class. Who agrees with that? First of all, I don't want a bill that tells my daughter she doesn't have to do it if I'm telling her she does, because she knows, hey, I don't have to, and all I have to say is my mom and dad want me out of it. So that's got a lot of work. There's some good parts to it, making sure parents do have a greater voice in their child's education. So there's some good parts to it. There's some parts that we need to fix before that thing. So, and this will be our last committee. I know Representative Brooks is working with Representative Womack to try and see if they can amend some of that to clean it up a bit, but I don't know if there's enough time to really vet that one this year.
Roger?
And there's all sorts of derivations of this same type bill. I mean, we had one in my committee to remove all testing, both state and local, from children 2nd grade and down. I mean, there's just all these different derivations. People think that children are tested enough. In fact, we had a bill in my committee about letting people opt out of the ACT. You know, it's just, it has been a battle this year. I think people are tired of their children being tested and tested and tested. But you know what? Life's full of tests. We call it a job. You know, when you get a job, you might have a project. Well, that's your test. You know, and we all have them, and we've all had to learn to adapt to them. And some of these are brought to us with really nice intentions, but we kind of look through the vetting process in these subcommittees so that we can see long-term, and probably the best person to see long-term is this one. He's great at looking through time and seeing what happens if we take this tack today. What will this look like in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years? And that's why I'm glad to have him on my subcommittee.
All right.
Still not going to vote for your bill.
Okay. It was a good try.
Last year, or as a result of last year, one of the things that teachers really got heartburn over was teaching a curriculum based on standards, but yet being judged on an assessment that was developed at Wyoming Alliance.
Oh, my goodness. Go ahead.
Are we going to be able to cure that where the assessment's going to be more aligned with what's been taught? And we're not going to put teachers in that tough situation.
That's the Norris-McCormick bill that creates Tennessee Teaching Evaluation Enhancement Act that addresses that. Do you know about that one, Bill?
Yeah, I don't know about that bill, but
That was House Bill 108.
that deals with how much of the percentage of the evaluate, right?
It is.
I think this dealt with getting the assessment lined up with the standards, which they aren't right now, which is not fair, but the state has done an RFP. They have, I guess, inked a contract with, what are they called, Measurement Inc., and they will get everything aligned. So it's not a good situation to be in this year, but hopefully next year it will be.
You want to talk about one of those? Eddie, is that in your committee? What this does is that it adds that an LEA is not required to use student state assessment results as the sole factor in employment decisions and adjust the percentages regarding student growth data used in the teacher evaluation criteria.
Yeah, and because of the comments we've heard, the student growth data is about 35% of a teacher that has an end of course test. It's about 35% of their total evaluation score. What this bill aims to do is, starting next year, that will reduce to 10% of that. The new test coming out, the TN Ready, will account for 10% of that 35%. Then the second year would grow up to 20, and then back to 35 of that new test. The reason being is we're not for sure, and the commissioner stated this in the subcommittee when we were hearing this bill, they're not 100% sure that the data is going to say the same. They're fairly certain it will, but there's that chance that it could be drastically different. That's why they're lowering that. Now, on the flip side, with that new test, let's say Susan for a second is a teacher, and under the new test, her score, student growth score, is higher than it's been under the old TCAP. Then in that 1 year, in any one of those years, she can use that data as the full 35%. So it does give teachers more flexibility to have some say in that 35%, what they're going to use. But it also reduces the amount till we see what's going to happen. The other thing that the commissioner said, and I mentioned it again last night, if we see that those scores come back drastically different than what's expected. She is coming back to the committee to say, let's hold off one more year before we go to the 20% to see what's actually going on with the new test. So there's going to be some things that's not just set firmly in stone. If we see things are doing differently than what we expect, we're going to adjust that as we go. And I think that's one of the important things that we did talk about, is the fact that the commissioner is willing to watch all of that. And the other, I mentioned to her last night, because I've heard from some Knox County teachers as well as some that live in the district that teach in different surrounding school systems, and it's around the evaluation point, which is their evaluation is submitted to the state before it's going over with the teacher. So we're looking at, do we need to put an amendment where that it has to be going over with the teacher before submitted, because there are some errors happening where the principal maybe interpreted what was going on differently than what was actually going on. So it gives teachers a way to say, hey, wait a minute, this is where there was an error in what you saw going on in the classroom before it's submitted. But then the commissioner's also wanting to look on her end to see if that's just something they can change without having to have legislation.
All right, Roger.
And we have a bill we're still working on right now. It's, testing and standards are all great, but right now what we ask our teachers to do is to look at a set of standards and shoot for a target that they have no idea what it looks like. It's like I told somebody, it was like the story of the 5 blind men who feel an elephant, and each of them feels a different part, and they're describing what this creature is, and one of them grabs the tail and goes, oh, it must be a pig. And then one of them grabs a leg and it goes, oh, it must be a tree. I mean, because they're all feeling different parts. What we do is we give teachers a set of standards, and then some third party makes a test on these standards, but the teachers have no idea what it looks like. They can't see it. But yet they're judged, and their evaluations are based on how the children do on this test. And so we actually have a bill this year to kind of the other thing is you disincorporate the parent. The test doesn't drill down enough. It says your child is below standard in math, but it doesn't tell you as a parent what your child is missing. So if you were to tell the parent, you're substandard, we might work all summer on addition and multiplication of fractions, only to find out that our child doesn't understand how to multiply and divide fractions, which is a whole different set of knowledge skills. And so what we're trying to do is to make it available so that you can incorporate the parent into the process once the test is done. Usually like TCAPS, the evaluation is given the next year to the next year's teacher, and so you lose there's this time that the parent could be engaging and helping the child fill in whatever skill set he doesn't have. But yet we don't drill down deep enough into that. And I'd like to kind of see some of that, because I think as a parent, if I know my child doesn't understand how to multiply and divide fractions, guess what we're working on this summer? But like I said, but you don't even know what the questions are on the test to know what, as a teacher, you're shooting for. So I'm kind of processing that one and see, because we want to have test security. We don't want teachers literally teaching test questions, but at the same time, giving teachers an invisible target to shoot for is a little challenging.
All right, we've got several other bills, but we're about... Hey, Bill.
Are we about out?
No, we are, Ben. I want to give a couple of minutes for people to ask questions and make comments.
Well, let me just quickly say this, because I've got something else that starts at 8:30, but I told them I'd be late. We've got hundreds and hundreds of education bills. I hope one day we all get together and say, let's not file any legislation. Let's just sit down and talk about parental involvement and discipline. Because I think we are making strides when it comes to evaluations. They're not perfect, but they're better than 2 times every 10 years that they were. The assessments are better. The standards are better. What I see in the schools now so much better than what I saw 20 years ago. But I always think it's kind of like a rain barrel with all the slats around it. We're raising all the slats, but there's 2 that aren't going up. So therefore, we can pour all the water we want into it, but it's going to keep pouring out at that one place. It doesn't matter how much money we spend, and that comes down to the discipline in the classroom, and a lot of that goes back to the parents and their involvement. And Roger, just talked about, well, if my child doesn't know math that summer, by golly, we're going to do it. That's not happening out there. It's not happening during the school time. And at some point, we've got to figure out, how do we get control of the classroom and not have a few children ruin it for everybody? So
Good point. Anybody got questions? Let's take 5 minutes at least and run over just a moment. If you have questions or comments, I know you've got a lot of folks in this room that are interested in it. Nick?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of technical stuff about how we set up standards, how we test, how we evaluate. I keep wondering, are we, maybe legislation isn't, the approach to some of these problems. I think Bill alluded to that.
Right.
I mean, part of the job of a teacher is to make learning interesting, to stimulate you, so you go home and work on it yourself, because ultimately it's you and the book and your brain that get the things driven home. I mean, are we squeezing that out of education? It seems to me that interesting projects and teachers that follow up, and like Bill said, parents that whip your butt if you're not getting your study, and turning off the TV at a certain hour, even the AT&T phone.
Devices. I think you've got a good point. I think all of us that grew up without devices in our hands and had parental involvement understand the secret is really having parents involved. And that is something, unfortunately, you cannot legislate. It has to be wanted and desired, and I don't know how we reach that point, nor do they. But I agree with Bill. One education legislation come up in the General Assembly. Any other comment? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question about the voucher bill. How much is the voucher, and what percentage of a private school tuition does it tend to cover? And this bill doesn't allow students to transfer to other public schools, right? Just private schools.
Right. The LEA, they have their own transfer policies within the LEA for that. What it would be just be the BEP money, the state and local portion of the BEP, or the school tuition, whichever is less. And they studied to see what this would mean, and there would actually be dollars left behind if a student left. So the public school would lose 100% of the responsibility of having the child, but maybe like 90% of the money.
What's the...
I really believe that if you're in a failing school, you are automatically eligible to transfer to another school. Doesn't happen.
Right. Well, in Knox County, there are transfer options. But Russ, what is the expenditure in Knox County? 9,000, 10,000?
Yeah.
He's gone.
It's $95
Okay. So I think, I don't know, somewhere it's like maybe 6,500 or so could transfer to a private school. That was your option, and the remainder of that would stay with the school without the student being there. So they would keep some of the public money that's been transferred.
I guess my concern is just if the student can't afford to pay the full tuition, if the voucher doesn't cover the full tuition, then maybe it would drain the wealthier students out of school and make it worse.
Okay. And also the private school that would take the voucher would have to take that as full payment for tuition.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's a good question.
Right. Anything else? Comments?
Let me say this real quick. I'm on about 2 conference calls a week. You all need to know, one, this chamber and its members know that you all are stars and you're doing an incredible job in the legislature of Tennessee. The other thing is, everybody across the state refers to Knoxville as you all being the dream team. And we appreciate it. We will never forget it. And thank you.
Good point.
When we started out, it was buzzsaw, and now you got it down to where it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, great comments. I mean, you can tell from this morning, these guys have done their homework. I've been in this business a long time working with legislators, and I can tell you from my experience that most places you go and have this conversation, they'd have to get their bills out and do this. These guys know what they're doing. Mayor, you want to comment? Get off your device.
I was getting a memo about that from Patrick Birmingham, so
Now, does everybody know that our mayor has a degree in, is it elementary education?
Education, has 5 areas of certification in each bracket.
I mean, just think, he,
What I would like to say is that, I spent 16 years in the legislature, and everybody talks about how fast you're getting. When I started, it was 16,500, I think it's 18,500 now. And let me tell you, it's long days and long nights. It's Monday through Thursday, every day of the week. It's supposed to be, everybody says, oh, it's a part-time job. That young, they're here Friday morning, they drove in late last night, Thursday, from after boring meetings. And it is hard work, and it's a dedicated bunch of people. We have one of the most fiscally sound states, and it's because of the legislature. They do the heavy lifting. See the governor, see mayors out cut through, because of the heavy lifting of these folks. We owe them a debt of gratitude. And I know everybody in the group, about 3/4 of you just rolling their eyes thinking, if I could do that, that young could do it.
These three would say no, don't.
I came into the legislature with Bill Dunn. I was in the mobile business, and he was climbing trees for a living. He would always go around, we were cutting trees and grinding them up, and the next day we're voting on it.
America's a great country.
He still cuts trees, I've seen him. He's got 5 kids, I don't know where he had. No, he was out splitting wood the other day, I've seen him go.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up because I know you're busy. Thank you all very much for taking.